Welcome to Lesson 1, Graph and Interpret Stock Bar Charts. If you'll notice on the front, this is an example of a typical stock bar chart. There's a bar in the middle with line segments jutting out on either end. Each part of this, the top, the bottom, and the line segments, all have significance when related to the price of a stock. Notice on this stock bar chart, this is for General Electric. There's actually two charts. The one on the top shows price and the one on the bottom shows volume. It tracks the day's highs, lows, open, and close. The bottom one shows the volume for the trade. Let's look more closely at one of these bars. Notice the line segments point to the day's open and closing prices. So if you think about the way you read, you come in here on the left, that's the opening price. This line right here then represents the opening price for GE, and it's somewhere between $32.80 and $32.90. Here's the closing price then. As you come out on the right side, we have the closing price, and that looks like $32.70. The high part of the bar represents the high of the day, and the lowest part represents the low of the day. So we have a low of $32.60 during the day, and at some other time in the day it traded for about $33.25. So this tracks what the stock is doing throughout the day. Below here we have the volume, the number of shares traded that day. It starts out at 0 and then it rises depending upon how many shares were traded back and forth throughout the day. And it looks like there were just over 30 million shares traded for the GE stock on April 30th. Let's go ahead and interpret. This is for Ford Motor Company. Which day had the greatest high price? Well, hopefully you said May 2nd. Notice the top of the bar. This is the highest of all the other days. So the highest price is represented by the top of the bar, and if you'll notice here, it was probably somewhere around $8.67. That was the highest price that it was traded at between April 28th and May 2nd. So which day had the least low price, the lowest price? Well, hopefully you said April 29th. Because as we just said, the bottom of the bar represents the lowest price of the day. So down here represents about $8.07 or 8 cents. Okay, now let's analyze between which 2 days did after hours trading have the biggest impact on the difference between the closing price of one day to the opening price on the next day. Okay. So now we want to analyze these line segments that come out from the bars. Remember that the one to the left is the opening price and the one to the right is the closing price. So let's look between May 28th and May 29th. There's a very small difference, so not much happened between hours. Let's look between 29 and 30. There's a pretty big gap there, but let's continue to analyze. 30 to May 1, no change at all, and then May 1 to May 2nd. Fairly big, but not quite as big as between May 29th or April 29th and April 30th. The closing price on April 29th was about $8.11, and the opening price on April 30th was about $8.22 for a difference of 11 cents. Okay. Let's look at volume. How many shares of Ford Motor Company were traded over the 5-day period? Well, notice we just need to look at the top of each of these bars because that's the volume traded for that day. And as we accumulate all of the tops of these bars, and we're just taking into account an estimate, since this gap is about 50 million, so we have to somewhat estimate. But if we add all these up, we get about 495 total shares traded over a 5-day period of time. All right, let's try to graph one on our own. Let's use this information to construct a one-day stock bar chart. So we have the open, we have the close, we also have the high and the low. This will give us our bar and our line segments for price. We also have the volume for that day, 44,500,000. So let's think about our steps. Step one, we need to determine an interval based on the range of prices. Well, let's look at the lowest price, which is $39.39, and the highest price, which is $40.65. So we want our interval to be a little bit below this, maybe $39.25, and a little bit higher than $40.65, so maybe $40.75. Step two, we should determine an interval amount. So by what step do we want to go up? Something that's easy. How about 25 cents? We'll go up in intervals of 25 cents. And then finally, we need to draw the graphs. And here's what it looks like. We have our first bar, which represents price. Remember down here, this would be our $39.79, our $39.39, our low at the bottom. And then our high up here is $40.65. Our opening price was our $40.10, and our closing price was the $39.79. Notice that I'm labeling and going up by 25 cents each time. Our volume was 44,500,000, so I just went up by tens and I wrote millions out on the side. And this is approximately 44,500,000. Okay, that concludes our lesson for today on analyzing stock bar charts. At this point, you should understand each element of a stock bar chart as well as be able to graph it given the appropriate information.